Oh, there he is. And I also want to acknowledge Pastor Leon Taylor from Jackson, Selma, Tennessee, who worshiped with us this morning. And maybe I should have told you earlier to watch what you say, because he's recording and videoing. So if you said something before I made this announcement, it's too bad. He has it. He has the picture. Not only the sign, but he has the picture. And to each of you, to the Clark Road family, to the New Mount Moriah family, to those of you in Radio Land, I figured since this is the 53rd anniversary, 53 years of service, I'd see if I could find a sermon that would keep me after 7 o'clock. And so if you're riding around with nowhere to go, or even if you got somewhere to go, put it off and come to Clark Road, and you'll get in on the rest of it. If you are homebound or at work and you don't hear the end of it, call 944-0202 and request the CD. It will be available for you. Clark Road Choir say, for the rest of my life, I'm going to serve them. And then New Mount Moriah said, and I understand while I'm serving, trouble is going to be in my way. And New Mount Moriah said, but there's a living in the valley. And while I'm serving him the rest of my life, and trouble is in my way, and the lily is in the valley, he's going to work on me until he comes back and receive me unto himself. When you're old, you went to an old school. In the old school, teachers, preachers taught, said, now, you may not have a whole lot to say, but read several scriptures so that if you don't say anything, at least they will know where to go get the word from. So in Psalm 87, verse 6, Psalm 139, verse 18, and Revelation chapter 7, verses 9 and 13 through 16, these words are found. Psalm 87. The Lord shall count when he writeth up the people. Psalm 139, 18. If I should count them, they are more in number than the sand.
All right.
Revelation 7, verse 9. After this, I beheld, and lo, a great multitude which no man could number.
All right.
Of all nations and kindred and people and languages and tongues, stood before the throne and before the Lamb, clothed with white robes and palms in their hands. And one of the elders answered, saying unto me, What are these which are arrayed in white robes, and whence came they? And I said unto him, Sir, thou knowest. And he said to me, These are they which came out of great tribulations, and have washed their robes,
All right.
and made them white in the blood of the Lamb. Therefore are they before the throne of God, and serve him day and night in his temple, and he that sitteth on the throne shall dwell among them. They shall hunger no more, neither thirst any more, neither shall the sun light on them, nor any heat. I want to label this discussion, When God Counts.
All right. Preacher.
When God counts. Father, I stretch my hand to thee. No. Sanctuary and those listening perhaps think, well, so what? I can count. But when God counts, his counting is different.
Preacher.
I believe most of you will agree with me when I say that mathematics tends to affect or influence every aspect of our lives. Now, to those who are in school or who have been in school have used this explanation when the teacher gave you an assignment or gives you an assignment. Why am I doing this? What good is it going to do me after I get out of this grade or the school? Well, there's one subject that you are going to need all of your life.
Preacher, preacher.
And that subject is mathematics.
Yes, sir.
We call it arithmetic. But in fact, there is some form of mathematics that can be used in everything that you attempt to do. If you're cooked and you're ready to bake a cake, you must use mathematics to measure the sugar, the butter, the flavor, and what have you, in order to have an edible cake. In preparing a meal, the same cook who does not take into consideration the science of mathematics is going to fail in the kitchen.
Preacher.
And many of the modern day cooks fail.
Preacher.
An architect, when preparing his blueprint, must make use of mathematics. The architect must determine the scale of measurement he's going to use, so when others read his blueprint, they will know the size building he wants built. The architect must determine how high the building will be, how many inches, feet, and yards the entire building will cover. In fact, a good architect can tell you the exact number of bricks it will take to cover a certain building, the amount of lumber needed, and the amount of concrete or asphalt it will take to finish the job. Mathematics is needful. Even in your love life, the science of mathematics is usually applied. For instance, when a man is communicating with the one he loves, I want to emphasize a man, communicating with the one he loves, who ought to be a woman.
Preacher.
And he tells her just how much he loves her when he discovers that he does not possess the mathematical figures to measure his love for her. He exclaims, "Honey, I love you so much." Since practically every aspect of life do we see the science of mathematics being applied, the science of mathematics may be divided into 6 broad categories. They are calculus, which deals with changing quotients, and analytic geometry, which is a combination of algebra and geometry, trigonometry, the science that deals with 3-sided figures or triangles, geometry, which deals with length and areas and their relationship in space, algebra, the branch of mathematics that deal with letters to represent numbers in solving problems. And last but not least, we have arithmetic. Now, arithmetic is that branch of mathematics that all of us should have some knowledge of. We may not know anything about the other 5, but all of us should know something about arithmetic. I know today we call it modern math, but it's plain old arithmetic. If you don't know how to do arithmetic, you're not going to get very far with modern math. Arithmetic is one of the 3 subjects taught in the old-fashioned one-room school that Reverend Ferris Evans attended. It was called one of the 3 hours. And one of his teachers was his sister. She was my teacher too. And before there was all of these new methods of teaching, we had what was known as the 3 R's: reading, writing without the W, and arithmetic without the A. And during those times, people would tell you, both parents and teachers, that if you fail to get this reading, writing, and arithmetic, it will be taught to you by the tune of a hickory stick. So even though we may not be quite as emphatic today as we were in yesteryear, we still recognize the need to know some arithmetic. And not only in our secular lives and textbooks do we find need for arithmetic, but we can find many instances in the Bible to which arithmetic principles may be applied. There are 66 books in the Bible. There are 1,189 chapters in the Bible. There are 31,173 verses in the Bible. There are 773,692 words in the Bible. There are 3,586,499 letters in the Bible. These are all signs of arithmetic. The Bible is full of arithmetic. God deals in numbers. When God created the heavens and the earth, He worked 6 days and then set aside 1 day for rest. God looked down on the world He had created one day and saw the sins of man and sent a special delivery to Noah, which read, "Preach one sermon for the next 120 years. Tell the people it's going to rain."
Preacher!
He also included in his message to Noah the dimensions of the ark. He said it should be 300 cubits long, 50 cubits wide, and 30 cubits high. When Nebuchadnezzar got ready to burn the church, he commanded his servants to heat the furnace 7 times hotter than it was usually heated. When Naaman went to the prophet to be cured, the prophet sent him word, "Go to Jordan and dip there 7 times." When Joshua took over the leadership of Israel, he wanted the city of Jericho, but the walls were too high and too thick. In order to take the city, he had to do something about those walls. Didn't have any dynamite. Could have sent drones over the wall. But he got instruction. For 6 days, I want you to march around the wall once every day. On the 7th day, I want you to march around the wall 7 times. And at the conclusion of the 7th time, I want you to shout and blow your trumpet. There are many other instances in the Bible to which the science of mathematics may be applied. Time will not permit me to name all of them. Now, let us look at arithmetic a little more closely. In arithmetic, there are 4 basic operations that may be performed on numbers. There are 4 different things that you can do with numerals. You can add, subtract, multiply, or divide. But first of all, let's look at addition. When we count 1 plus 1 plus 1 equals 3. But when God counts 1 plus 1 plus 1 equals 1. God the Father plus God the Son plus God the Holy Spirit does not equal 3 gods, but 1 God. This is somewhat like steam, ice, and water. Steam is water in the gas. Ice is water in the solid. And water is water in the liquid. It's not 3 waters, it's just 1 water.
Preacher!
Snow, steam is water, ice is water, and water. There is just 1 water. Addition is a very helpful operation in arithmetic. However, when we add, our sums become insignificant when compared to God's add-ins. We add title to our name, money to our bank account, clothes to our wardrobe. But all of these things will pass away.
Preacher!
When God adds, there is something noticeably different about his addition. The book of Kings tells us that Hezekiah was sick unto death. But he turned his face to the wall and prayed to God, and God added 15 years unto his life. Now, what would you rather have, a new car or 15 years? On the day of Pentecost, Peter preached and the Lord added 3,000 souls to the church. Peter didn't have any gimmicks. He didn't promise any washing machines and dryers either. He didn't promise that you were going to get rich. But he preached the word that Jesus crucified, that he died and was buried and rose on the third day, ascended back to heaven. He's coming back again. 3,000 souls were added to the church. Another writer said, add to your life virtue. Add to virtue temperance. Add to temperance brotherly kindness. Add to brotherly kindness love. And be sure to add some Jesus. That's addition. The second operation is the law of subtraction. The law of subtraction says if you have more of any numeral than you can use, in order for you to get the exact amount, you must do some taking away. Well, if we're going to be the kind of people that God requires of us, we've got some subtracting to do. Paul had the idea when he said to us, let us lay aside every weight and the sin which doth so easily beset us, and run with patience the race that is set before us. And in order to be what the Lord requires of us, we've got to do some taking away. Preacher, what is it that I need to take away? Well, you got to take away that old evil heart.
Preacher!
You've got to take away those old low-down, deceitful ways. You need to take away that old funny attitude. You know the kind. Somebody get close to you and you turn up your nose. You need to take away that old Monday morning gossip. Because we don't wait till Monday morning any longer. We start on Sunday night.
Preacher!
You need to take away sticking your nose in other folks' business.
Preacher!
You need to take away all of that old malice, envy, hatred, and strife. If you want to be the kind of child that God requires of you, you've got some subtracting to do. Now, before I leave subtraction, though, I would like to remind you of this law in subtraction. You see, in the array of numbers in the base 10 system, we have a range of numerals that goes from 0 to 9. We also have what we call a place value system in arithmetic. Now, the law in plain arithmetic says that you cannot take a larger number from a smaller number. For instance, you can't take 5 from 3. But sometimes an occasion arises where we need to take 7 ones from 0 1. However, the law also compensates for such occasions by allowing us to go to the next highest place value and borrow. Well, you call it rename. In order to have enough for us to take some away. Well, in God's arithmetic, there's also room to borrow. Sometimes I want to take away hate. But my hate is so much bigger than my little love. Then I hear God saying, you only in the ones or 0 position. But I am love. Borrow some from me. Third operation that we will deal with is multiplication. God told Adam and Eve to be fruitful and multiply. They finally got around to it, but before they did that, they took fruit from the tree they weren't supposed to. The book of Malachi informs us that if we bring into the storehouse our tithes and offering, the Lord will open up the windows of heaven and pour you out blessings of which you cannot have room enough to receive. And I just like to throw this in. Every good house has many more windows than it does doors. And so God said, if you just bring me the tithe and the offering, I won't just throw something out the door. I pour it out of windows, and any side of the house you own, blessings will come pouring out. Yeah. We must obey God's word. Another writer said, cast your bread,
Preacher,
and it will return to you in many days. And my grandparents and that group used to say, not only will your bread come back, but it'll come back with butter on it. And this may not mean a whole lot to you, but I found out not only will it come back with butter on it, but it'll have some molasses on it. We are trying to multiply here. I don't mean to teach you a course in arithmetic, but I do want you to understand what can happen when God counts. Now there is the operation of multiplication in that operation known as the identity factor. Now the identity numeral in multiplication is the number 1, a numeral 1. The law of identity says 1 times any number is that number, no more and no less. But whole numbers are different when God counts, because he had to count one day, and I looked at the numbers he used. 1 times 2 and 1 times 5 did not equal to 2 and 5, but it equaled to 5,000 plus 12 baskets of fragments. 1 Jesus times 2 fish and 5 loaves were enough for 5,000 men plus women and children, and then they had 12 baskets left. You remember when God was out in the desert place, he used this form of mathematics to handle the problem. It appears to me that through close examination and observation, many of man's laws in arithmetic are imitation of God's law. For instance, subtraction is the inverse of addition. Division is the inverse of multiplication. Well, if you want God to add to your life, you must do some subtracting. If you want the Lord to multiply in your life, you've got to learn how to divide. You remember hearing about Elijah and the widow, don't you? Elijah was running from Ahab and Jezebel, hid himself by a brook, but the brook dried up. But he made his way to a widow's house, found her out in the yard picking up sticks. She didn't have a whole lot, but she divided with Elijah, and they were able to live until the drought was over.
preacher.
Our last operation in arithmetic that I want to mention to you is division. All of us are familiar with the departure of Israel from Egypt. Moses came to the Red Sea, the army was behind, mountains on the side, army behind him. But God did some dividing. So Moses stretched out the rod. He divided the Red Sea. And the children of Israel crossed over on dry ground. Egyptians saw what had happened and they tried to use Israel's road.
Preacher.
God, let the waters come upon me. That's what we got the song, Mary, don't weep. Don't want Pharaoh's army got drowned.
Preacher.
God is able to do that. I know you've heard of the sower who went out to sow seeds. Prepared the ground well, and he bought hybrid seed. But when the blade was sprung, tares came up among the wheat. Servants wanted to go out and destroy the tares. Want to pull them up. But Jesus said, let them grow together. Leave them alone. And he said, when they get grown, I'll do the divide. So many times when we come, we want to do the divide. Leave them alone. I know we are celebrating 53 years, Pastor Evans, and I know in those 53 years there were many times he wanted to do some divide. In fact, some division needed to be done. But he heard the Lord's voice and leave him alone. 53 years later, he's still here. Many of them are gone. That God said, I'll do the separating. When we observe professed Christians doing contrary to the will of God, we want to divide. But Jesus said, let them alone. Men who are supposed to be representing God drag his name through the mud. We want to divide. But Jesus said, leave them alone.
Preacher.
You know why we must leave them alone? We don't know how they are wrapped up under the ground. But my God will wait until they are full grown. Then he will divide.
Preacher.
I've kept you too long already, but when we count, we must end up with an answer. If you add, you get a sum. You subtract, you get a difference. You multiply, you get a product. You divide, you get a quotient. But what God has been counting since creation.
Preacher. Sometimes
he has added. Sometimes he has subtracted. Sometimes he divided. And other times he multiplied.
Read.
But come with me over to Revelation. John is used as God's accountant. John was on an island on the Lord's day.
Preacher.
John, what did you see? John said, I saw 4 horses.
Preacher.
I saw a city with 12 gates. I saw a river as clear as crystal. I saw a tree, right by the river with 12 mountains of fruit. And a leaf from that tree was good for the healing of a nation.
Read.
He said, I saw 12 tribes. Dan, Reuben, Manasseh, Zebulun, Issachar, Levi, Simon, Judah, Gad, Joseph, Benjamin, all divided into 12,000. But then John said, I kept on looking and I saw another number. John, count for me.
Preacher.
And John said, well, I started to count. The units were 1, 10, hundreds, thousands, 10,000, millions, 10 millions, billions, trillions. Wait a minute, I run out of numbers. John said, I saw a number that no man could number. And so I turned to the Lord and said, sir, thou knowest. And he told me, these are that have washed their robes in the blood of the Lamb. I don't know how you feel about it, but I'm glad I serve a counting God, because when others counted me out, the Lord counted me. When others counted me down, the Lord counted me up. He wrote my name in the Lamb's book of life. And I don't mind the burdens I bear. I don't mind the troubles I share. I know the Lord will take care of me, because He's good and that matters. He's so good until He made a promise. I'm going away to prepare a place for you in my Father's house. Are many mansions. I said, wait a minute, Lord, you got it backwards. Mansions are bigger than houses. He said, on your scale, they are bigger, but on my scale, in my Father's house are many mansions. And I said, if it's good enough for you, it's good enough for me. Yeah, I'm glad. I'm glad the Lord can count, because He made a prediction. In fact, He prophesied, tear this temple down and I'll build it back in 3 days, not 5 days, not a year, but in 3 days. On Friday, they nailed him to a cross. He hung his head and he died. Friday night and all day Saturday and Saturday night. Friday 1, Saturday 2, but Sunday morning that's 3. He got up. Oh, power! He can count. And one of these days, I want to hear him say, servant, servant, servant. Preacher! The door of the church is open. Are you in God's mathematics? Preacher! You in God's arithmetic. Make sure you account it when He add up His number. The door of the church is open. I know the Lord, preacher, will make a way. Yes, He will. troubles too. Doors still open. Oh, when I get there, and I don't know just what to do. I'm gonna go in secret prayer. He let me leave all of my burdens there. I know the Lord will make a way. Yes, He will. I wonder if there's one this evening. Oh, God will. I tried. I know He will. Yes, He will. I know He will. I know He will. I know He will. Oh, do you know the Lord? Will He make a way? Yes, He will. Oh, the friends will walk out. The crowd will get thin. The friends will walk out. But Jesus will step in. I know the Lord will make a way. Yeah. Oh, He will. I tried. I know He will. Yes, He will. I know my God will. Oh, I know the Lord will make a way. Yes, He will. Oh, He'll pick you up, turn your life around, place your feet on solid ground. I know the Lord will make a way. Yes, He will. He will. He will. There's always room for one. Amen.